The Scourge had never said no to anything with a heartbeat. That was their whole thing, their entire evolutionary resume. 300 documented species across 12 star systems, and every single one had been reduced to the same quiet, screaming end. They didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. They consumed until nothing moved, then moved on. So when the first contact team stepped off the shuttle onto the research station's blood-slick deck plates, weapons raised, hearts pounding hard enough to crack ribs, the Scourge just stopped, turned around, walked away, and that's when the screaming really started. The transmission arrived at 0347 ship time, which meant Captain Soren Vex was already awake. He was always awake at 0347. Had been for 11 years, ever since the Hearth Tax riots where he'd watched his partner bleed out through a neck wound while he held pressure and begged and lied about the medics being almost there. The body didn't forget those hours. It carved them into the nervous system like a prayer. Captain. His exo's voice came through the cabin speaker, tight in that particular way that meant she was holding back approximately 17 different kinds of alarm. Go ahead, Lieutenant Quan. We're getting a distress call from Dorian Research Station. The Scourge are in the system. Soren sat up. Didn't rush. Rushing was how you died, with your boots half-laced. Asset status? Full burn to station is 12 hours. We're the only ship in range. Then we burn. He was already moving, pulling on the same uniform he'd worn for the past 3 days because shipboard laundry was a privilege for crews that weren't running skeleton operations. The last argument was a patrol cutter, which was a generous term for a gun with engines and life support. 43 crew. Light armor. Enough firepower to make a frigate think twice, but not enough to survive a direct engagement with anything that had teeth. The Scourge had a lot of teeth. By the time Soren reached the bridge, the entire watch rotation had shaken into something resembling readiness. Quan had the tactical display up, a holographic smear of red icons bleeding toward the Dorian station's blue dot. The math was ugly. The Scourge had already established orbital superiority. Whatever was happening down there, it wasn't a siege anymore. It was cleanup. Communications, Soren said, settling into his command chair with a kind of calm that made new crew think he didn't care. Veteran crew knew better. Veteran crew had seen the captain's hands shake when he thought nobody was looking. Give me whoever's still alive on that station. Aye, sir. Patching through. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Human, female, mid-30s, with the particular pallor of someone who'd been awake for 3 days and had stopped being scared about 12 hours ago. The hollow-eyed calm of the already dead. Captain Vex, she said. Dr. Eris Thorne, station chief. You're not going to believe what just happened. Try me. The Scourge boarded us 6 hours ago. We had 47 personnel on station. We're down to 23. She paused, and something crossed her face that Soren couldn't quite read. Not grief. Not relief. Something stranger. They stopped attacking, Captain. Just stopped. In the middle of a corridor, dropped their weapons, and walked away. Behind her, Soren could see movement. Shadows passing across the bulkhead. Too many shadows. Doctor, are you saying the Scourge are still on the station? Yes. Armed. The ones we've seen aren't carrying anything. They're just standing there, watching us. Like we're a museum exhibit they don't know what to do with. Soren exchanged a look with Quan. The lieutenant's face was carefully blank, which meant she was doing the same math he was. Unknown variables, unknown threats, unknown everything. The worst kind of tactical situation. Doctor, I need you to listen very carefully, Soren said. We're 12 hours out. Can your people hold that long? A long pause. Then Dr. Thorne laughed, a short, sharp sound that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with the particular madness of surviving something you should have died in. We can hold, Captain. The question is whether you're going to believe what you find when you get here. The transmission cut. Soren sat in the silence for a long moment, watching the red icons creep across the tactical display. The Scourge had never taken prisoners, had never left witnesses, had never shown anything resembling restraint or mercy or tactical patience. They were hunger given form, the galaxy's most successful extinction event, and Every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered on them suggested that negotiation was as useless as prayer. And yet, set course for maximum burn, Soren said. Weapons hot. And someone wake up the science team. I want everything we have on Scourge behavior patterns, historical contact protocols, and whatever the hell just happened to make them stop killing. Aye, sir. Quan hesitated. Captain, do you think it's a trap? Soren thought about Dr. Thorne's face. That strange expression. Not fear. Not relief. Something closer to wonder. I think, he said slowly, that we're about to find out something nobody else in the galaxy knows. The last argument made the transit in 11 hours and 42 minutes, which meant Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka had pushed the reaction drive to 112% of rated output and was going to have a lot of opinions about it later. Right now, though, she was on the bridge with everyone else, watching the Dorian station resolve from a blue dot into a tangle of twisted metal and flickering emergency lights. The Scourge ships were still there. 3 of them. Big ones. The kind that usually meant an entire system was already dead. They weren't firing. Tactical assessment, Soren said. Quan shook her head slowly. They have us dead to rights, Captain. Their weapons range exceeds ours by a factor of 6. If they wanted us gone, we'd be gone. So why aren't we gone? Nobody had an answer. The docking clamps engaged with a sound like dying machinery. Soren had his hand-picked team ready in the airlock. 8 Marines in full combat gear, plus Dr. Mira Chun from the Science Division, who'd been muttering about xenobiological anomalies since they'd translated the Dr. Thorne's transmission. Remember, Soren said, checking his sidearm for the 4th time, we're not here to fight. We're here to figure out what the hell is happening. Nobody fires unless I give the order or something tries to eat you. Clear. The Marines nodded. Dr. Chun adjusted her glasses and looked like she was about to be sick. The airlock cycled. The station's interior was wrong in ways Soren couldn't immediately articulate. The lights were working, which meant the power grid was still functional. The environmental systems were humming, which meant the air was breathable. But the corridors were empty, not abandoned. There were signs of recent habitation everywhere. Personal effects scattered on the deck. A half-eaten meal on a table in the mess hall, the food still moist. Someone's jacket draped over a chair like they'd just stepped out for a moment. But no bodies, no blood, no signs of the violence Dr. Thorne had described. Captain, Quan said through the comm, her voice thin with static. I'm picking up life signs. Human and something else, scattered throughout the station. They're not moving. Not moving how? Not moving at all. Just stationary. Like they're waiting. Soren signaled the team forward. The corridor branched ahead, leading toward the command center where Dr. Thorne's transmission had originated. He took point, weapon up, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, wrong, wrong. They found the first Scourge in the junction. It was standing with its back to them, facing the wall. 7 feet tall. For arms. Carapace the color of old blood. The kind of creature that had haunted humanity's nightmares since first contact 50 years ago. The thing that had wiped out colonies and destroyed fleets and turned entire planets into graveyards. It wasn't moving. Contact, Soren whispered into his comm. 1 Scourge individual. No visible weapons. It's just standing there. Confirmed, Quan said. I'm seeing the same thing across multiple sensor returns. They're all facing walls, Captain. Every single one. Dr. Chin pushed past the Marines, her earlier fear replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fascination. This is wrong. This is completely wrong. Scourge don't do this. They don't hold positions. They don't stand still. They're a hive species. They're always moving, always communicating, always. The Scourge turned. Soren's finger tightened on the trigger. The Marines raised their weapons. Dr. Chun made a sound like a stepped-on mouse. The Scourge looked at them. Its face was a nightmare. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, each one a different color. A mouth that split too wide, revealing too many teeth. The kind of features that evolution designed specifically to trigger every fear response in a primate brain. And yet, it didn't attack, didn't lunge, didn't even raise its empty hands. Instead, it took 1 careful step backward, then another. Then it turned and walked away, moving down the corridor with the same deliberate slowness as before, disappearing around a corner without ever looking back. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Did that just happen? One of the Marines whispered. Captain, Dr. Chen said, her voice shaking, I think it was afraid of us. The command center was a disaster zone. Not from combat, from panic. Overturned furniture, shattered screens, the kind of chaos that happened when a group of intelligent, trained professionals realized they were about to die and started doing stupid things. Dr. Thorne met them at the door with a cup of coffee in one hand and a sidearm in the other. She looked worse than she had on the transmission. Dark circles under her eyes, a tremor in her left hand that she couldn't quite hide. But her voice was steady. Captain Vex, you made good time. We pushed the engines. Soren lowered his weapon, though he didn't holster it. You want to tell me what's going on here? Dr. Thorne took a long drink of her coffee. I'd like to, but I'm not sure I understand it myself. They just stopped. All of them. Every scourge on the station, in the middle of whatever they were doing, and just stopped. Some of them were actively fighting my people. Hands around throats, Captain, and they just let go. Stepped back. Walked away. Did you do something? Use some kind of weapon? We tried everything. Conventional weapons, energy weapons, even some experimental stuff we weren't supposed to have. Nothing worked. We couldn't hurt them, and apparently they couldn't hurt us. She laughed that same hollow laugh from the transmission. Except they could. They've been hurting us just fine for 3 hours. And then they couldn't. Dr. Chun had already moved to the station's research terminals, fingers flying across the controls. Captain, I'm pulling the sensor logs from the initial contact. There's something strange here. Define strange. The Scourge didn't just attack randomly. They had a pattern. A very specific pattern. They were targeting specific individuals, specific systems, in a specific order. It looked like they were looking for something. Looking for what? Dr. Chen's face went pale. I don't know. But whatever it was, they found it approximately 6 hours ago. And that's when everything stopped. Soren turned back to Dr. Thorne. Who was the last person they attacked? The very last one before they stopped. Dr. Thorne's expression shifted. That same strange wonder from the transmission, but deeper now. More personal. His name is Elias Vance. He's our xenolinguist. Been on station for 3 years, working on Scourge communication protocols. Theoretical stuff. Nobody thought it would ever work. Nobody thought what would work. Dr. Thorne set down her coffee. He figured out how to talk to them, Captain. Not their language. Nobody's ever been able to crack that. Something deeper. Something he called resonance patterning. He said it was like finding the right frequency for a locked door. And when the Scourge attacked his lab 6 hours ago, they found the door. They found the door. And apparently what's on the other side scared them more than anything in the galaxy. The lab was a wreck. Not destroyed. That would have been too simple. It was disassembled, every piece of equipment taken apart with surgical precision and laid out in neat rows on the floor. Screens disconnected and stacked. Cables coiled like sleeping snakes. Even the chairs have been disassembled, their components arranged by size and material. In the center of it all sat Elias Vance. He was younger than Soren expected. Late 20s, maybe with the kind of face that looked like it had been designed to be forgettable. Brown hair, brown eyes, average height, average build. The kind of person you'd pass on a station corridor and never think about again. He was also crying, not sobbing, not making sound. Just tears running down his face in steady streams while he stared at something on the floor between his feet. Something small. Something Soren couldn't quite see. Dr. Vance. Soren approached slowly, hands visible, weapon holstered. I'm Captain Soren Vex of the last argument. We're here to evacuate you. Elias didn't look up, didn't respond. Just kept staring at whatever was on the floor. Dr. Vance. I didn't mean to. His voice was soft. Flat. The voice of someone who'd used up all their emotion hours ago and was running on empty. Didn't mean to what? I didn't mean to show them. Elias's hands moved, gesturing vaguely at the disassembled lab. I was just trying to understand. The resonance patterns, they're like music, Captain. Every species has a different song, different key, different tempo, different instruments. And the Scourge, their song is all minor chords. All grief and hunger and loneliness. Soren crouched down, trying to see Elias's face. What did you show them? Finally, Elias looked up. His eyes were wrong. Not damaged, different. The irises had shifted from brown to something that caught the light like oil on water, shifting colors that didn't have names in any human language. I show them us, Captain. All of us. Every human who's ever lived. Every human who ever will. I show them our songs. The thing on the floor between Elias's feet was a small device, about the size of a human heart, which made sense because that's exactly what it looked like. A heart made of metal and light and something that moved under the surface like living muscle. What is that? Soren asked. That's what they left behind. When they saw what we were, when they heard our songs, they gave me that. And then they stopped. All of them. Every Scourge in the galaxy, I think. Not just on this station. I can feel them, Captain. The resonance goes both ways. They're all just standing there, facing walls, looking at something they can't understand. Something that broke their entire understanding of what life is supposed to be. Dr. Chun had followed Soren into the lab. She was staring at the heart device with an expression that Soren recognized, the look of someone who just realized their entire field of study had been rendered obsolete. Dr. Vance, she said carefully, what exactly did you show them about humanity? Elias smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who just committed a crime they couldn't even name. I showed them how we love things that hurt us. How we keep going when there's no reason to keep going. How we make art out of our grief, and music out of our failures, and hope out of absolutely nothing at all. He picked up the heart device, cradling it in both hands. The Scourge don't have any of that, Doctor. They evolved as perfect predators. Efficient. Clean. They consume because that's all they've ever known how to do. And now they know something else. Now they know that a species of soft, fragile, short-lived apes from a gravity while nobody wanted to figure out how to sing while they were dying. And they don't know what to do with that. The evacuation took 8 hours. The Scourge watched the whole time. They stood in corridors and doorways and maintenance shafts, their 4 eyes tracking the movement of the human survivors with something that looked almost like curiosity. They didn't attack, didn't threaten, didn't even hiss or posture or do any of the things that the intelligence file said they always did. They just watched. And every time a human got too close, every time someone stumbled or fell or had to squeeze past in a narrow passage, the Scourge moved away, gave ground, created space, like they were afraid of being touched. Captain, I need you to see this. Quan's voice pulled Soren away from the loading operation. She was standing in front of a viewport in the station's observation deck, staring out at the Scourge ships. What am I looking at? They're changing configuration. Look at the hull patterns. Soren looked. The Scourge ships had always been ugly things, organic-looking, asymmetrical, the kind of design that suggested function had absolutely no relationship with aesthetics. But now the hulls were shifting. Patterns were emerging. Colors were bleeding across the surface in ways that looked almost deliberate. Those are words, Quan said. I think. Or something like words. Dr. Chun is trying to translate. Translate what? This, Captain. Quan pulled up a holographic image on her datapad. It was a magnified view of one of the Scourge ship's hulls, and the patterns were clear now. Not random. Not organic. Something structured. Something that looked almost like a language. But not a language of letters or symbols. A language of hearts. Thousands of them. Medial. Depicted in intricate detail across the hull of every Scourge ship in the system. Human hearts. Alien hearts. Hearts of species that hadn't even been discovered yet. All of them rendered in the same shifting, iridescent colors that Soren had seen in Elias Vance's eyes. They're collecting them, Dr. Chun said, joining them at the viewport. Every heart they've ever taken. Every civilization they've ever consumed. They're putting them on display. Why? Because that's what you do with something you don't understand. Something you can't consume. Something that scares you so badly you have to make it into art just to process it. Soren looked back at the evacuation. The last of the survivors were boarding the last argument now, moving quickly despite their exhaustion. Elias Vance was in the middle of the group, still carrying his heart device, still crying those silent tears. What happens now? Soren asked. Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, Captain. Nobody's ever seen the Scourge do anything like this. For all we know, this could be happening everywhere. Every Scourge in the galaxy, just stopping, facing walls, drawing hearts. And Elias? I don't think he's human anymore. Or maybe he's the first real human any of us have ever seen. The first one who actually understands what we are. The last argument's docking clamps disengaged. The ship pulled away from the station, leaving behind the Scourge and their silent, watching presence. But as they accelerated toward the jump point, Soren noticed something. The Scourge ships weren't following. They weren't attacking. They were just sitting there, their hulls covered in hearts, facing the empty space where the human ship had been. Waiting. For what? Soren didn't know. But he had a feeling they'd be waiting for a very long time. 3 weeks later, the last argument received its first visitor. Not a message. Not a transmission. A visitor. A Scourge individual, traveling alone in a ship barely larger than a shuttle, which should have been impossible because the Scourge didn't do anything alone. They were a hive species. They moved in swarms. They didn't have individuals. This one was alone. Captain, you need to see this. Quan's voice was strained in that particular way. That meant she was working very hard not to panic. It's requesting docking clearance. Requesting, using standard communication protocols. In perfect Gal standard. With correct grammar and everything. Soren made his way to the bridge, trying to process what he'd just heard. The Scourge didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They didn't make requests. They just showed up and started killing until there was nothing left to kill. Put on screen. The image that appeared was wrong. Not because it was Scourge. Soren had seen plenty of Scourge by now. But because this Scourge was different. Its carapace was covered in the same heart patterns that had appeared on the ships. Its eyes, all 4 of them, were the same shifting, oil-slick colors as Elias Vance's. And it was wearing clothes. Human clothes. A jacket, specifically. One of the standard issue station jackets from Dorian Research Station, with the name Vance stitched over the left breast. Hello, the Scourge said. Its mouth moved, forming the sounds with obvious difficulty, like someone learning a new instrument. I'm looking for the human called Elias. Soren looked at Quan. Quan looked at the screen. The Scourge waited, patient and, still, its 4-colored eyes never blinking. State your purpose, Soren said. I want to understand. The Scourge's voice was getting better already, the sound smoothing out as its mouth learned new shapes. He showed us something we cannot consume, something we cannot fight, something we cannot run from. We need to understand what it is. And if we don't let you, the Scourge tilted its head, a gesture that looked learned, practiced, like someone who'd been watching humans for a very long time. Then we will wait. We are very patient. We have been waiting for 3 billion years. We can wait a little longer. Soren made a decision that would probably get him court-martialed. Clear docking bay 2. And someone find Dr. Vance. Tell him he has a guest. Elias was in the medical bay when they found him, which was where he'd been spending most of his time since the evacuation. Not because he was sick. The doctors had run every test they could think of and found nothing physically wrong with him. But his eyes had stayed that impossible color, and his hands had started doing something strange. He could feel things now, not just with his skin, with his whole body. Resonance patterns, he called them. The songs that everything sang, the ship's hull, the air in the vents, the blood in his own veins. He could hear them all, layered on top of each other like an orchestra tuning up. He's here, Soren said, standing in the doorway of Elias's room. The Scourge. One of them. It wants to talk to you. Elias looked up from the heart device, which he hadn't put down since the station. I know. I felt it coming. Can you talk to it? Figure out what it wants. I already know what it wants, Captain. Elias stood up, tucking the device into his jacket. It wants to understand why we didn't break. Why we kept singing even when we were dying. Why we're still here after everything the universe has thrown at us. And what are you going to tell it? Elias smiled, the same not nice smile from the lab, but softer now. Almost kind. The truth. That we don't know either. That's the whole point. The meeting happened in Docking Bay 2, with a full Marine escort and enough firepower to start a small war. But when the Scourge stepped out of its ship, ducking slightly to clear the hatch, which was designed for smaller species, nobody fired. Nobody could. The Scourge was beautiful. Not in the way humans use that word. Not symmetrical, or pleasing, or attractive. Beautiful in the way a supernova was beautiful. Beautiful in the way a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding was beautiful. It radiated something that Soren's brain couldn't quite categorize. Not danger, not threat, something older and stranger and more fundamental. Regret. The Scourge was radiating regret. "I am called," it said, and then made a sound that no human throat could reproduce. A chord. A song. A name that was also an apology. But you cannot speak that. So I will be called Student. Elias stepped forward, and the Marines tensed. But the Scourge student didn't move. Didn't attack. Just watched Elias with those impossible eyes. "You came a long way," Elias said. "We came from everywhere. Every Scourge in the galaxy stopped what we were doing and turned toward this place. You showed us something we have never seen." "What did we show you?" Student's mouth opened, closed, opened again. It was struggling. Not with the language. It had mastered that in the time it took to fly here. Struggling with something else. Something it had never had to express before. "Hope," it finally said. "You showed us hope. And we do not know what to do with hope. We have never had hope. We have only had hunger." Elias nodded slowly. "That must be terrifying." Terrifying. Student tested the word, turning it over in its mouth like a strange flavor. "Yes. Terrifying. We did not know we could be terrified. We thought we were the terror." "You were." Elias took another step forward. The Marines were practically vibrating with tension now, but Soren held up a hand. "Wait. Let this play out. You were the worst thing in the galaxy. The thing that ended civilizations. The nightmare that other nightmares had. And now you're something else. Something that can learn. Something that can change. Something that can feel something besides hunger." Student was quiet for a long moment. Its four eyes moved across the humans in the docking bay, taking in the Marines with their weapons, the technicians with their data pads, Soren with his hand still raised. "You are not afraid of us," Student said. It wasn't a question. "We're terrified," Elias said. "We're always terrified. That's the thing you don't understand yet. We do everything while being terrified. We love while being terrified. We hope while being terrified. The fear doesn't stop us. It never has. Why? Because we're too stubborn to die. Because we're too stupid to give up. Because we figured out a long time ago that the universe doesn't care about us, so we have to care about each other." Elias reached out, slowly, and placed his hand on Student's carapace. The Marines gasped. Soren's hand dropped to his weapon. But nothing happened. Student didn't attack. Didn't flinch. Didn't even breathe, if it breathed at all. Instead, it leaned into the touch. Like a starving thing finally being fed. "We want to learn," Student said, its voice cracking on the words. "We want to understand. We want to know how to be something other than what we were made to be." Elias looked at Soren. Soren looked at Elias. The whole galaxy seemed to hold its breath. "Then stay," Elias said. "We'll teach you." The Scourge didn't stop being terrifying. They couldn't. They were 7 feet of nightmare fuel with too many eyes and too many teeth, and a history of galactic genocide that stretched back longer than most species had existed. That didn't just go away. But they stopped being only terrifying. They started asking questions. Hundreds of them. Thousands. About art and music and love and grief and all the things they consumed without ever understanding. They started building things instead of destroying them. Strange things, beautiful things, things that made no sense to human eyes but felt right in ways that defied explanation. And they started protecting humanity. Not because they were asked to, not because they were paid or threatened or manipulated. Because they had seen something in the human song that they couldn't live without. Because they had tasted hope for the first time in 3 billion years, and they would do anything to keep tasting it. The other species in the galaxy didn't understand. They called the humans mad for trusting the Scourge. They called the Scourge broken for refusing to feed. They waited for the inevitable betrayal, the moment when a nightmare species would remember what they were and finish what they'd started. But that moment never came, because the Scourge had learned something that no amount of consumption could teach them. They had learned that the most powerful thing in the universe wasn't hunger. It was a hand reaching out. It was a voice singing while everything burned. It was a species of soft, fragile apes from a gravity, well, nobody wanted, looking at the thing that was supposed to destroy them and saying, "We're not afraid of you. We're afraid of everything, but we're not afraid of you," and meaning it. Years later, when the histories were written, they called it the turning. The moment when the Scourge became something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy's long, bloody history. A horror species that refused to harm humans. Not because they were afraid, not because they were defeated, because they had been shown something they couldn't consume, couldn't destroy, couldn't even fully understand. And they had decided that was worth more than all the worlds they'd ever eaten. The heart device that Elias Vance had been given now sits in a museum on Earth, in a room full of Scourge art and Scourge music and Scourge attempts to capture the human song in forms that their alien minds could comprehend. School children visit it on field trips. Lovers hold hands in front of it. Old soldiers come to stare at it. And remember the day the universe changed. And sometimes if you stand very close and listen very carefully, you can hear it beating. Not like a heart, like a song, like hope, like a species of stubborn, terrified, beautiful apes who refused to die quietly, who sang while they burned, who reached out to the monsters and said, "We're here. We're not going anywhere." And if you want to understand what that means, you're going to have to learn to love. The Scourge are still learning, but they're trying. And in a galaxy full of hunger and darkness and things that want to consume, sometimes trying is the most terrifying thing of all.